Hi everyone, and welcome to this video on it's my review of my new Meca Cup pedals. I received these about a week ago, and what attracted me to them was essentially the price really. These came in at about £680 for the set of three, which I would normally spec Husingveld Ultimates for any projects that I work on, but they're sort of best part of nearly £1,200, so at about half the price I thought I'd give these a go, especially for my own rig. I could always sell them on if I wasn't happy with them. So initial thoughts when they came out of the box was I was quite impressed with them. I thought they looked pretty good really, for the price. Really like this feature on the brake with the cups that restrain the way that the rubbers deform. They're very sturdy, made of 3mm stainless steel. So let's just take you through what actually comes with it. Obviously, throttle pedal, brake pedal, and the clutch pedal. Got an electronics box like this, labelled clutch, brake and throttle. He's got these sort of proper nice electrical connectors on. 3D printed box, which looks like it's been blasted or something to tidy it up a bit. I'm not the world's biggest fan of 3D printed things, but this is one of the tidier 3D printed boxes I've seen. I know it makes a difference for some people. Some people want their high-end components to be really high-end, and things like this would be one of the downfalls for anyone that's kind of that anal about their componentry. It's not the most professional way to present something when you've got 3D printing sort of finish and quality, but to anyone who's a bit like me that's more interested in the functional side of things than the sort of nth degree aesthetics of things, I think that's perfectly acceptable. I do prefer the Husingveld enclosure, which is simply clear perspex, sort of spaced apart. Looks a bit more professional, looks a bit funkier, but I can see here that they've tried to do something different, and the manufacturing method that's probably open to them in this price range, this is probably a good compromise. A cable, USB cable, what looks to be an alternative brake pedal pad complete with gripper tape. A selection of rubbers for changing the feel of the brake pedal, and some mounting hardware, mounting them to your rig. They came boxed in a lovely box, kept it well packaged. Oh, and you get instruction manual, and you get a couple of stickers. So let's take a look at how these things actually work. So if we look at the throttle pedal, this is the load cell in the bottom here. It's a beam type load cell. So it's effectively earthed to the pedals because it's bolted. See these two holes here, they've got bolts through from the other side onto a plate that mounts onto this carriage plate here, which is then bolted to these feet plate, and then down inside here, at the base of the sort of moving arm of the pedal, is a little spring down in here, and that spring is pushing on the other end of the load cell. So this end of the load cell is being pushed down by the spring. So that's a way of converting the load cell to be more of a displacement dependent sensor rather than the load dependent sensor that it sort of is naturally. It's done that because you've got a constant rate spring there under there that is linearly increasing the load on the end of the load cell with the movement of the pedal. I've got this nice enclosure for the wiring electronics at the back of the load cell. Again, it's 3D printed, so up close you've got the kind of rough 3D printing finish, which again, for certain people, I'm taking this from comments that I've seen on like Facebook posts and what have you. I would imagine that certain people would be put off by the quality of the finish of that sort of a component, but again, for me, I think it's a neat way of doing it in this price bracket. It does tidy things up a bit, and you've got nice connectors on there. So going through to the 3-pin electrical connector. One thing that springs to mind straight off is that spring is really soft, and as a result I think it feels unnaturally soft, and it feels like it could do with some damping. Maybe if that was a little stiffer, you wouldn't feel the need for any extra damping. That feels a bit too easy, a bit bouncy. And there is some adjustment here, but I don't think it's going to have a great deal of effect. We can undo that, lift this up, and it'll make it a bit stiffer. Undo it and drop it down in this groove, and it'll make it even softer. But gut feeling, I'll review it when I actually drive them, but gut feeling is that's too soft, and that could do with being a fair bit stiffer. There's a bit of a rattle here where this shaft that carries the spring is a bit undersized, or the hole rather in the bush is a bit oversized. I don't think it's end of the world, but I'd rather see something that was engineered a little bit better than. That's another 3D printed item in there, 3D printed bush. I think the hole's just a bit too big. Personally, if it was me, maybe a tip for a Meca cup, print that with the hole too small, and then drill it out or ream it out, so that you get a bit better fit. And maybe that, if it was a tighter fit, maybe that would give you an element of damping, just to maybe slightly improve the feel of it. Bit surprised that Husingveld don't have an issue with this, because it's, it is in effect a direct copy of the way they make their pedals in laser cut plates, although it's quite a bit thicker, the 3mm plates. Load cell operated by spring is all Husingveld stuff. This kind of carriage mechanism, adjustment mechanism, all very Husingveld. Adjuster on the throttle. So this is preload, so this would be the stiffness of the pedal when you first go to operate it, and then when you overcome it, you'll be back into having the same rate. doesn't appear to be making a great deal of difference, primarily because I think that spring was just too soft to get any degree of real preload in it. Marginal improvement. Again, I'll reserve judgment until I actually get it in the sim. This is a 3D printed knob with a thread in it. That's probably my biggest issue with the pedals, is that, you know, really didn't ought to be reliant on 3D printed items with threads in for adjusters. That seems to me to be a recipe for disaster. And given how nicely they've designed it and how nicely some of the parts are made, and you've got these machined cups on the brake pedal, spending a little extra and getting a few machined, some of these bits machined, or I'm pretty sure if you go through a standard parts catalogue, there will be injection moulded knobs like this that you can buy with, you know, metal inserts in that are threaded. So I'm not convinced that the of the requirement for all this 3D printed stuff. Again, we've got side spacers here that are 3D printed. And you can't tell me that if you can get those machined, that the price of those little side spacers, that they can knock out 1,000 of those for every 10 of the 3D printed ones, is going to be night and day difference on the cost. But that's for them to decide. But I'll point it out because I don't think it's a game changer. It's not a game changer for me. I still like the pedal, but I know for some people, given the comments that they make on sort of public forums about small details, way less significant than these kind of quality issues, I think some people will be having a problem with this. You know, this over-reliance on 3D printed components. Have a quick look at the clutch. So the clutch mechanism works in the same way as the throttle. You have the load cell mounted across the bottom, operated by a spring off the bottom of the arm of the pedal. So very similar. And then you've got this over center mechanism that gives you the high initial stiffness, and then when it goes over center it becomes really lightweight to replicate the feeling of a biting point. So I think this is a mechanism I've not seen done in this way on sim racing pedals before, although it is basically the same, you know, the same theory of an over center mechanism as other people use. Certain things I don't like about it. I think it's poorly engineered when you stack nuts up as spacers, especially when they're nylox. Looks wrong, and it's a bit cheap and nasty, to be honest. Like, it's not very well engineered if you have to do that. Proper spacer, or even if you're going to stack nuts up, make sure that this one's not a nylock, so that you're actually clamping up on a face of a nut rather than on the nylon sort of knurled over carrier part for the nylon insert. 3D printed bush. Come on guys, I don't think we need 3D printed bushes. I think we can machine a bit of alley, or drill out a bit of alley, or buy, there's plenty of stock, you know, hollow bushes available. We don't need to be seeing that. Again, we've got the same thing here, side spacers on the rod ends. Don't think they need to be 3D printed. I think, you know, machined out of alley, they are going to be pennies. And like I said previously, you know, you can make 1,000 of those by the time you've made probably 10 or 20 of those on a 3D printer. Little bit of rubber bump. Oh, a little bit of rubber bumper there for where the screw head hits the stainless. Needs something, obviously, but to me that's just a little bit Mickey Mouse. I think we can engineer that better than that. This over center mechanism Again, we're relying on stacks of nuts. I just don't really think that we need to. I don't really think that that's a good way of doing it. I just don't think we need it. It's Mickey Mouse. A proper bit of spacer in there, or design this with the lever coming out of it, bent off of it, or something. We don't. This is the sort of thing that you do for prototypes when you're knocking them up in your garage. Just find a few nuts laying around and bolt it up, just to see if it works. Again, loads of plastic spacers, 3D printed. One assumes, feels like they're 3D printed. Really don't think that that's doesn't smack of any of quality when that happens. And lastly, the brake. So the brake operates in the same way as the housing valve, but differently from the clutch and throttle. So this time, here's where the load cell is earthed to the carrier again, but it's this. We're now, instead of pushing it down off of the via a spring up here, we're pushing it down directly off the back of this stack of rubber washers, rubber bumpers. Now this is my favourite, and this is actually the reason why I bought these pedals, because I thought this is a nice feature. One, it looks quite cool, and two, there are issues with other types of pedal that use these elastomer bushes, bumpers, where they expand a bit too much and then they start cracking, and people say that the feel of them on return after having pushed changes and whatnot, whereas these cups control the amount that these bumpers can bulge. So I think that's potentially quite a good feature from a reliability point of view and from an operation point of view. So it's a 200 kilo, can't remember what the name of the Mavin, I think they're called, load cells, which is a good quality load cell. It's what Husingveld also use. I've shown you before that there's rubber bumpers come with it, so you can change the feel of it. I can't really operate it too much on the bench, but it's pretty stiff already. There's some degree of adjustment for the pedal plate, both up and down and left and right. And then, as I showed before, there's a gripper tape big plate, which is much more like the sort of pedal plates that you'd find in a real race car, proper sort of size. And that's actually another one of the nice features of the pedals that I liked. The reason why I bought them is because this throttle pedal, and to a certain degree the clutch pedal, much more realistic race car type pedal pad. Okay, so I think for a demonstration of what the pedals are like close up, that's one thing I did want to say, another little negative, but again, remember that my negative comments are really me trying to keep in the back of my mind some of the things that I see people comment on. I'm trying to just, if I'm negative and you see through it, if you like, and you see that they're not really too much of a concern for yourself, then at least that's been pointed out to you, and if you buy it, then you're buying it with full knowledge of that they are suitable for what you want, and they will meet your needs. So one of the things, so this comes with it, your mounting hardware for your sim rig. Never really a fan of coach bolts, much prefer a button head cap screw, and I hate non-locking nuts. They just come loose, so I would ditch those. And then in this instance, this might be quite useful because the square of the coach bolt fits into the slot and stays there, so when you're screwing the nut on from underneath, you don't need to have the hassle of holding that with an Allen key like you would with a socket head cap screw. So I'll let them off on this point. I would rather see a lock nut there. I had these sort of nuts on steering systems, and they just come loose in every few minutes. Always doing them up tight. I don't want to be doing that with my pedals, so I will be swapping those for nylock nuts. Okay, so another thing that jumped out at me when I opened these pedals was the overall height of them. On the Houston builds, they're quite tall. They're up about like this up here, and that did cause some issues when we built our first rigs for the British Touring Car Championship drivers, because little racing drivers with little feet found that the pad was too high up, and we was having to put heel plates underneath for them. Now with these, I think there might be well, they're either going to be a lot better than the Houston belts, or it's going to be a bit of an issue. So this is my shoe, and as you can see, the pedal's quite a bit shorter than my foot. Now it'll only be when I get it on the rig that I can determine whether or not, given the angle that I use and the range of adjustment I've got on this pedal face, as to whether or not this will actually be better than the Husingveld without the heel step or not. Now if it isn't, the only issue is, because if you can't make them taller, what am I going to do? Whereas at least with the Husingveld, because they're too tall, I could put a spacer block on the bottom to get them the right height. Here it might be an issue. I hope it won't, because I've got an option here to go up probably an inch. So maybe that'll do it. Maybe that'll just be what I need, or maybe, like I said, depending on the angle, that might be okay. I won't know that until we put it on the rig, but I thought I'd point it out because that is a sort of another obvious difference between these and the Husingveld pedals. Right, so there's the full set of pedals mounted on one of my base plates. It's the one that was on my rig that I've been using with some other pedals. The interesting thing to note is the hole spacings on my plate were done to suit the Husingveld pedals that I normally would supply to customers, and these are fitted on. Doesn't necessarily mean that the whole spacing is exactly Husingveld, because I've got a range of adjustment here backwards and forwards, and obviously they've got the slots, but it does mean that they do retrofit to anything that's got Husingvelds on at the moment, or any base plates that you might come across that are drilled ready to take a Husingveld set. Again, initial thoughts, I've wound some preload into this throttle pedal. I've moved the adjuster up to the top of the slot, and I would say it's maybe not even as stiff as the Logitech G29 pedals that I've got here as a sample. Maybe it's the same, if a bit lighter, same or a little bit stiffer than the Thrustmaster pedals that I've also got just laying around in this garage here. Clutch does feel nice and stiff, and then goes away freely. And the brake is too stiff by hand to really tell too much. So I'm now going to put this on the rig and see what I think about the feel of the pedals. Probably going to do that in a different video, because I should go through installing and setting up the games with them. So until then, thanks for watching, thanks for taking the time to watch. Oh, before I sign off, I will just say that this video may seem overly critical, but once again, what I want to say is that I'm perfectly happy with the pedals for what I'll be using them for. I'll find it quite easy to make any modifications that I can't, that I want to, things that I feel that I can't live with. I am perfectly happy with the amount of money that I paid for them and for what I got. I was happy with the service, really happy with the way they came packaged. I've only really been that critical as I have been with them because, like I say, I note that a lot of people in sim racing are very critical of very small details, things that wouldn't normally bother me. So I feel that in my reviews, and I've actually had a bit of criticism from people that have watched my reviews before, saying, why didn't you highlight X, Y, and Z when they receive them? So I'm going to try to be a bit more critical in future and highlight things that may be not perfect, and then I can leave that decision to you guys whether or not those issues are something that you can live with, whether you just don't care about them or whether they are a deal breaker, but that's up to you. So once again, thanks for watching the video, and until next time, please like and subscribe, and until next time, I'll see you soon.